Kopa remains one of the greatest mysteries in the Lion King universe. Although he was never part of the films, he was introduced in The Lion King. 6 New Adventures, a book series released in the 1990s. In these books, Kopa is portrayed as the firstborn of Simba and Nala, making him the rightful heir to the throne of the Pride Lands. However, when The Lion King II, Simba's pride was released, Kopa was nowhere to be seen. Instead, Kiara was introduced as Simba's only cub. This led to multiple theories about his fate. Some believe he was removed from canon because Disney wanted Simba's pride to focus solely on Kiara and Kovu's story. Others speculate that something much darker happened, that Kopa was attacked by Zira, the follower of Scar, which led Simba to exile the outsiders before the events of The Lion King II. This theory gained traction because of Simba's extreme distrust of Kovu, as if he had already lost a cub before. But what if Kopa never died? What if he survived the attack and instead of returning to the Pride Lands, he found himself at the Tree of Life, the same mystical place where his younger brother Kion would later travel? This what if explores the possibility of Kion meeting Kopa for the first time, uncovering secrets about their past and potentially changing the future of the Pride Lands forever. For years, the Pride Lands believed that Kopa was gone. Whether he was injured and left for dead or simply exiled after an attack, one thing remained certain: he never returned. If he had survived, the most logical explanation is that he was forced to travel far away, eventually reaching a land beyond the Pride Lands' borders. The Tree of Life is a sacred place introduced in the Lion Guard, a refuge for injured animals and those seeking guidance. Kion's journey to the Tree of Life was driven by necessity. After being bitten by Ushari, a venomous snake, he was left with a scar that not only caused him pain, but also threatened his ability to control the roar of the elders. Seeking healing and wisdom, Kion traveled with the Lion Guard across different lands until he reached the Tree of Life. But what if Kopa had already been there long before him? The Tree of Life is known to be a sanctuary where lost animals find a new purpose. If Kopa had wandered to this mystical place, he could have grown up under the protection of Queen Janna and her kingdom, learning from the wise rulers and eventually finding peace in a land far from the Pride Lands. Kion and Kopa's paths may have been different, but both were shaped by the burden of being Simba's son. While Kion struggled with the expectations of leading the Lion Guard and controlling the roar, Kopa may have struggled with the pain of being forgotten. But fate would eventually bring them together in a way no one could have predicted. If Kopa had survived and found refuge at the Tree of Life, his reunion with Kion would be nothing short of extraordinary. Kion's arrival at the sacred land was originally meant for healing, but instead, he would come face to face with a brother he never even knew existed. At first, Kion might not have realized the significance of the lion standing before him. Kopa, having lived outside the Pride Lands for most of his life, would have been different. His posture, his expressions, and even his scent unfamiliar to his younger brother. But something in their instincts would have signaled that they were connected. Perhaps it was their shared golden fur, their similar facial features, or the way they both carried themselves as natural leaders. Over time, Kopa would reveal his story. The pain of being lost, the struggle of surviving without a pride, and his eventual acceptance of a new home at the Tree of Life. The idea that Simba, Nala, and Kiara had moved on without ever looking for him might have filled him with resentment at first, but under the guidance of Queen Janna and the other inhabitants of the Tree of Life, he would have learned to find peace. For Kion, this revelation would change everything. He had spent his entire life believing he was the second-born, the forgotten prince who was never meant to rule. But now, standing before his older brother, he would have to rethink his own destiny. Would Kopa want to reclaim his place as Simba's heir? Would Kion have to choose between his loyalty to his pride and his newfound connection with his brother? Their reunion would not be without conflict. Kopa may have felt abandoned, while Kion may have struggled with the idea that his entire lineage had been kept a secret from him. But, despite their differences, one truth would remain. They were family. And no matter what happened next, they had a bond that could never be broken. The decision to return to the Pride Lands would not be an easy one for Kion and Kopa. Both had found their own destinies away from the kingdom. Kopa had built a life at the Tree of Life, and Kion was on the path to becoming its next protector. But with the weight of their shared history, they knew they couldn't ignore the truth forever. Their family needed to know what had happened. When Kion and Kopa finally set paw back on the Pride Lands, the reaction would be a mixture of shock, disbelief, and overwhelming emotion. For Simba and Nala, the sight of Kopa, alive, strong, and changed, would be a moment of both joy and sorrow. The son they had once lost had returned, but at what cost? Kiara, raised her whole life as the rightful heir, would suddenly face an unexpected dilemma. Was Kopa meant to be the true king? Simba, despite his love for Kopa, would struggle with his emotions. He had lived with the pain of losing his firstborn, and for years he had ruled with Kiara as his successor. Now, with Kopa's return, a long-buried conflict would resurface. Would he be forced to choose between his children? Kopa, on the other hand, would not necessarily want the throne. He had spent years away, learning a different way of life, free from the burdens of royal responsibility. But the pride would not see it that way. The older lions who once knew him might question Simba's rule. After all, tradition dictated that the firstborn should inherit the throne. If Kopa was alive, shouldn't he be king? Tensions would rise as the pride struggled with these questions. Kion, caught in the middle, would feel torn between his loyalty to his family and his understanding of leadership beyond just bloodlines. He had learned from Rani that a true ruler was not defined by inheritance, but by wisdom and purpose. Could that same lesson apply to the Pride Lands? At the heart of it all, there would be one central question. Would the return of Kopa unite the Pride Lands, or would it create a divide too deep to repair? The question of Kopa's role in the Pride Lands would not have a simple answer. Despite the initial tension, both Kopa and Kiara would come to realize that leadership was not about who was born first, but about who was best suited to guide the kingdom forward. Kiara had been trained for years as Simba's heir, and Kopa, despite being the eldest, had spent most of his life outside the Pride Lands, disconnected from its struggles and traditions. Rather than fighting over the throne, Kopa would make a choice that would define his legacy. He would not challenge Kiara's rule. Instead, he would take on a new role, one that honored his experiences beyond the Pride Lands, while still allowing him to protect his family's legacy. The best path for Kopa would be to join Kion as a guardian of the kingdom, standing between the Pride Lands and the outside world. With Kion leading the Lion Guard in a new capacity, Kopa could serve as an ambassador, ensuring peace between the different regions of the animal kingdom. He would bridge the gap between the Tree of Life and the Pride Lands, making sure that balance was maintained not just within his homeland, but across the vast world beyond. This decision would bring closure to Simba and Nala, who would no longer have to choose between their children. Instead of division, Kopa's return would strengthen the family bond. Kiara would continue as queen, Kion would remain a leader in his own right, and Kopa would become the missing piece of their story, a protector, an advisor, and a legend in his own way. By the end of this what if, Kopa's story would not be one of exile or forgotten history, but of rediscovery and purpose. His return would not create conflict, but a new chapter in the circle of life, one where he carved his own destiny alongside the family he never stopped belonging to. What if Kopa had truly survived and returned? Would he have been king, or was his destiny always meant to be something greater?